Okay. I have added more data sets in the possible list of the visualization semester projects. I'll keep adding few more, and then I'll uh, give you a first target for what you need to do regarding the semester project. So let us go back to just a minute. Just okay. All right. So we have looked into some basic uh, some variables which are very basic. Let me share my desktop. Can you see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay. So we have looked into some of the variables and their basic summary and some of the histograms of the thing. A histogram and how they are distributed and all, and we spend a little bit of time understanding this 2x2 table, and we realize that there are 4 actions by the special teams and and the possible outcomes, and there are cases where it is 0. It most likely that possible outcome is not possible. That outcome is not possible. Say for punt, block, kick attempt, it's not possible. So that's why we are not seeing this event at all. And that's why we are seeing 0 here. So I have give a little bit of explanation here, and I uploaded that notebook in the Moodle. So the last day's notebook I have. So next is, now my question is, how can we move next? What shall we do next? So if we again look into the questions that are being shared, that is what is the strategy in the best result, and what are other strategy that could be adopted. So that is at the team level looks like, and that is one of the major goal of this analysis will be. Another is rank special team players. Each employs a variety of players. So one thing we can think of, I was thinking actually that, just a minute. That in this this table that we have created, can we create this table for 2 teams, and then can we compare, and probably that could be a good place to start. So if we look into the plays, I think, is that Make sense what I'm saying, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So um so if we look into the data set, I mean the plays data set which has this, or if we just write at the end, um, say call names of names of plays, this plays data set. So it has all the uh, column name, play ID, game ID, play ID, play description. And here we have it here. So um, return ID, kick blocker ID, yard line, snap home score, claimed play result, and absolute yard line number. So description, games play players.cv, tracking game play ID and NFL ID. PFF scouting data file containing play level scouting information of each game. Um, so, so one thing we can do, we can take the from the game related games.csv, we get the game ID and say home team abbreviation and visitor team abbreviation. So a game being played by home team and the visitor team, a particular game. And then if we merge these two, if we merge these two like games and the plays, then along we will know basically what I'm trying to say is um, we'll know who is. So let me do a small kind of thing. So basically what I'm trying to say, so if we just say head please get new ID, and then if okay, and then if we just say head about the games, now these two uh, data set The only common thing is game ID. Well, game ID, maybe play ID, I think. Game ID, play ID. Here it is game ID season. Yes. So we can merge these two data set with the game ID. Okay. So that's what we will do. So we can try to merge, say, merge games with plays by game ID. And this will give us a new data set. Let's call it games underscore plays. Okay. And if is the case, so we can see that all the columns are being merged now. Now, what we can do from this new data set, the new merge data set, we can just check how many games, unique games ID are there, so that we will know that many games informations are there. Unique.
Sir, the I for ID should be capital.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are quite a few unique game idea coming. So we'll just take the length of this, ngth. So there are 764 game IDs are there. Now what I will do, I'll just keep the game IDs in one vector, the unique game IDs in one vector. And then what we can do, we can create a, say, some dummy subset of the game ID. Now, if I just write game ID 1, say 1. So this is the first game ID that we have in that vector. If I just say 2, this will give us the second game ID. Now, whatever be the game ID, what we can do, we can create a small dummy subset, maybe. Maybe just write dummy data set, which will be what we can do. We can just take this data set, this new merge data set, and just say that, okay, my whatever the game ID is, that's exactly equal to whatever the game ID, equal to say 1. Okay. And I just say that, okay, now if you see, there are a couple of things. First of all, in this small dummy data set, like, just I want to create this data set as a placeholder. I don't want to keep it there. But definitely, since only a particular game ID, what I have done, I said, okay, create a subset of this major data set, and wherever game ID is this particular game ID. So that means the game ID is only single values. It will take all the game ID will be same game ID. Okay. And in that case, rest of all your information like season, week, game data, game instant, home team, visitor, all these things will be pretty much same, constant. Only the play ID are changing, and let us just check it out. What is the play ID? So the play ID will be player identifier, not unique across the game. So this is an interesting thing. So that means it will be different game to game. Okay. Now what I'm thinking, we can think of is one possibility could be, we can try to look into this data set, this table. We can create this table for this particular game. So previously what we did, we create that data table for all the games together. But here we are doing it for one particular game. So and if we run it, so there are only few cases we are getting the spatial points. Actually, we don't need to merge this data set, because we just need these information about in the game data set. We have given a game ID, we get this season, week, game date, game time, home, whether home team and visitor team, and player ID. This things we are getting. I don't think any other informations we are getting. The visitor, player ID also not. Player ID is part of the play data set. So, so we don't need these informations. Actually, we don't need this information. We can just simply, we can actually delete this. We don't need this thing. But if we want to merge two data set, that's the way to merge basically. So I'll keep this for you guys, so that you know whatever is required, it is here. What else we can do? So
Sir, for ranking of the player, didn't we need to look at the data of players CSV?
that's true. So how do you want to do that? Any idea?
Uh, Sir, first open the players CSV and then
Players says we. Okay. So
maybe with play ID we can make a subset of the data.
fine. That's a good idea. So we can just take meter read dot csv equal to, let me see if I think we have to take that input and all this. Just a minute. I have to copy this folder path. Copy the folder path. And then it equal to true. I'll call it players.csv. All right. Um, there must be a comma. Yeah. So right. So NFL ID, height, weight, birth date, and all these things are there. Position, display name, college name, display name. Okay. But what is okay? Now, what we need is basically NFL ID. Is it there in the play data? I don't
No,
think.
sir.
Huh? Can't see it.
No, sir.
No. So we can't uh, join the player data directly with the play data. Okay. Let's have a look into the tracking data. But player data does have the game ID, right? But no, it's NFL, just only
No,
NFL.
sir.
Uh, player data. It's saying player data has game ID, play ID, NFL ID, but I can't see it. It's not there. Hmm, that's weird. They're saying that they have the game ID and play ID, right? Uh, Let us see. Players.cfl. The file contains pre-player level information. The key variable NFL ID. Fine. All right. Uh, yeah. So play ID and game ID is missing. Only these informations are there, looks like. So it's supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 column, but we are getting only 7 column. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. All right. So there is a bit of a mismatch of what is given and what is there in the description. Okay. So if we just take the players to a histogram, there are also interesting thing that we are seeing, that there is sort of a bimodal behavior we are seeing. Is this and next. All right. So one of the, okay, so very interesting behavior. Um, hmm, all right, next. We have the tracking data and PFF scouting data.
Sir, even tracking data didn't have any information about NFL ID. So I can't understand how we can rank the player, like if there are no connection with the game.
So basically, what we have to do, look, we have this play data, which has the game ID and play ID, right? And we have the tracking data, which also has the game ID and play ID. So most likely we have to merge these two data set by game ID and play ID. Okay. And then we will get, if the NFL ID is there in the play ID. So basically they have done some, then we can use that NFL ID to merge the tracking data. I mean, that is most likely that is one of the way to solve this problem. I don't know. That missing two variable is ID variable. These two variables are missing, right? I mean, that is where I think this could be going to be a problem because of these two missing keys going to be a problem. But we have to check where other data set has the NFL ID. So in plays.csv have the kicker ID and return ID. Okay. Right. So here in this one, they have this kicker ID. So kicker ID is NFL ID of place kicker, punter or kickoff. Return ID, NFL ID of returns play. But if the kicker ID, return ID is there, any other?
So the kicker ID and the return ID, both are ID, the NFL IDs of the players from players.csv.
From players.csv. No,
From
no.
player
Yes,
dot,
sir.
so from player data, what you have as NFL ID is the unique identification number for that player, and that is used to show which player is the kicker or which player is the returner in that play data.
Wait a minute. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it is a sub ID basically. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All of you are. Do all of you understand what? Just a minute. So here is the kicker ID in the play data and return ID, and this is, where is this kicker ID and return ID are being there? Is there anywhere else? But no other places these two ID are being used, right?
Sir, I guess we can subset the data from the play ID, like like from the particular kickers. If some particular kicker ID has some data, so we can subset all the data, and that will show the all the kick used by that player.
The ID of the place kicker. So kicker ID is basically NFL ID. That's what you are trying to say.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And NFL ID is what? NFL ID is.
Sir, it's unique identity of a player.
Okay, NFL ID is the player identification number, unique across the player. Fine. And then Okay, kicker ID is the considered as a NF. Actually, it's an NFL ID. So that means that particular kick was taken by that particular player. Okay. Our return ID is okay, fine. All of you, I think that is what, yeah, that is what it means. Okay, okay. Similarly, kick blocker ID is also there. Okay. So basically, if I just take one row, let's take one row of play data, okay, then it will be and then we can see say kicker ID is 44966, right? Now what we can do, this is, so I'm from plays data set. I'm just taking the first row, and then in that first row, what I'm saying that, okay, give me the kicker ID. So basically, kicker ID is I'll get in the players data. So this is actually a unique NFL ID. So from the players data, so this is 44966. So from the players dollar NFL ID. So maybe I just do it in this way. Dollar NFL ID equals to this particular guy, NFL ID. So this kicker ID is belongs to Jake Elliott. Okay. So this is what it means basically. So probably this particular, in a particular kickoff, a particular action, which was a kickoff, was taken by Jake Elliott. So how we, so that was taken by, the kick was taken by Jake Elliott. Okay. Now, so the return ID, let us similarly, we can look for on the first thing. So what we can do on the first thing, we can do kicker ID. We don't need the everything. So what we can do, we can just write we can do return ID. What else we need? Game ID. Play ID. Anything else we need to look into for the time being? So return ID is kick blocker ID. blocker ID. So if I just run this, so it was not return ID is NA, it was not return, and kick blocker ID is NA. So it was not blocked probably. That is what it means. So penalty yards, wait just a minute. Kick length, if we look into the kick length, so it was kick length was 66. My guess is in this kick return yardage will be also NA because my kick return ID is NA. So yeah, this is also kick return yardage is also NA. And result, if we look into the play result, is 40. So probably they get an advantage of 40 yard or something. Absolute. So net yards gained by the kicking team, including the penalty yardage. So basically, we can say this particular kickoff was taken by Jack Elliott. It was not blocked, and the end of the play result, net 40 yards were, kick length was 60 yards, 66 yards, and net yards gained by the team was 40 yards. So that's how you have to little bit carefully pick all these informations.
Sir, can we subset all the data that has particular kick ID? Like
Yes,
that will
we can do that. We can do that. So so basically that will give me what you were saying. If we do that, that will give us the result
all the record of
of
that particular
this
player.
particular player, Jake Elliott, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that. The way I will do that is I will just take place data because that is where my things are there. And from place dollar, and I'll take the kicker ID equals to this guy. So yeah, so we can see there are quite a few cases, and they all take by J. Elliott, kick 65 years, J. Elliott 24 years field goal, J. Elliott. So this is one particular player. Okay. So we can do the one more thing. We can just say, tell me the how many cases we have regarding J. Elliott. So 485 kicks related stuffs are there. And regarding this one particular player. Okay. And so let us try to understand this player, one particular player, and then we will, what we can do, we can try to write a generalized code, which will give us pretty much a nice comparison of the entire thing. So what we will do, let us take this into say some dummy data set. We can call it dummy data set. And just so this is our dummy data set. The first thing and what we can do is in this data set for this player ID, we can actually look into this table for this particular player. Just yeah. Now this particular player tried extra point 81 plus 5 and 81 of them were good and 5 of them not good. And then tried 54 plus 12 filled gold. There's 150 plus 79 plus 1. So basically about 200 plus some kickoffs and 2 punt. So not many punts are actually taken by this guy. This guy were mainly taking kickoffs and field goal and extra point. So this is what we are seeing. Now, what we can do, we can put the kicker IDs, all the kicker IDs in one place, some all unique kicker IDs, ID in one place. So and then kicker ID, I just say 1. And then what we can do is from the players data set, we can just take the kicker ID here and the display the name. Print. So in this case, this is Jack Elliott. Now what I will do, I'll just take some I. I'll take I equal to 1 and replace here are 2 ones, right? I'll just replace both of them by I. Okay.
Sir, or we can define a function that will do that.
What?
We can define a function that will take that ID as input.
That is what I'm heading there, but I'm just motivating how I'm going to, I will try to generalize, and then I'll put enough line of command, which I'll put it into a function and then I'll just generalize. Okay. So here I have taken I equal to 1, then I can take I equal to 2, and then this is Cameron Johnston, who is only kickoff and punt. So he's basically a punt specialist. So he's a punt specialist, and this is his performance. There, here is a guy, Matt Bryant. There is another punt specialist. So now you know, and there are some people who are more in the extra point, field goal and kickoff. So typically that is what happened. There are some punt specialists and there are people who are on the specialist in the field goal and extra points. So as now what we can do, we can put it into a function. So a player performance, kicker performance, we can call it a, since basically we are doing it, we can call it a, we can write a function called kicker performance, which will take a function. We'll define the function. How we write the function? We just typically write it in this way, and within the open parenthesis, we give all the arguments, and within the close curly parenthesis, we give the codes. So typically this is how it is. And what I will do, I'll just take this point. So in Python, you need to keep track of the indentation, right? And that is most important in Python. If your indentation goes down, your code will be wrong basically. Here you don't have to do the indentation. It's not compulsory, but I personally prefer to do the indentation because that looks the code little bit nice looking. It makes the code little nice looking, and anybody else who is trying the code, they will get a much better feeling. Correct? So what I'll do, I'll just give a here and and now if I just say e performance equal to performance equal to 2 is equal to 3, just you can see all the performances are nicely arranged here. Okay. Any question? Next, what can we do? Any idea? So we can try similar thing with the return ID. Like if anybody has done any return or anything, correct? So since there are return ID, so we can similarly, we can just do the there are quite a few return ID we can see. So what we can do is there are a lot of NAs also, and that makes sense because there could be kick where nobody actually returned. So naturally in that was a successful kick. So there will be, we can't do, I mean, there will be no return ID. So we have to delete the, we will not consider the NAs. So we can just omit for the time being. NA. Now you see there is no NA to begin with. And similarly, we can first try to write a generic code first. Mhm. There was one kickoff. So Justin Hurdy, there was one kickoff which was returned. He returned two cases where he returned, and there was a punt where 23 punt he had a fair catch muffed or he returned. This is the first. Justin Hurdy is a player who did that is his performance as a while returning a kickoff. So similarly, we can write a similar performance, return performance equal to function and open parenthesis, curly parenthesis, and I'll put curly parenthesis here. And here my I and return performance is 1. This is 2. This is 3. So there is second case was Shelton Gibson. There were, I think, 3 kickoffs which was returned by him. And then Darren Sproles, there were quite a few. Punt was by a fair catch, 1 muffed and 1 20 return, and 1 kickoff was returned by Darren Sproles. So in this way, we can develop some, I think, performance analysis. And what else we have here other than kicker ID and return ID? Kick blocker. So NFL ID of blocker of kick on play if there was a blocked field goal or blocked punt. So somebody tried from the opposition, tried a field goal or a punt, and it was blocked by the opposite one player. So can you write the performance of a blocker, kick blocker? So it was actually called returner, not. So I'll just correct my thing. Yeah, returner ID. So I'll write it as a returner. So that will be correct. Spelling. So how we write a performance of a, like, at least any idea? Mm-hmm. Any idea? So what do you think? How do you would like to write a performance? Why don't you try to write function which similar way to evaluate the just to check out to pull the performance of a blocker. Take 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I'm not sure why it's not recovered. There must be something I'm missing. I don't know. Please. Yes. So if I just write this, these are the cases. Okay, fine. And so these are the cases where we have blocker ID. And some kick blocker IDs there, and it means it was done. Blocking was done by a player. Now the question is, okay, let us try to get this. Say, just write it like this. I don't know why it is happening. So blocker IDs. Four four eight four two. Okay, let me just keep blocker ID. Game ID. And kick blocker ID. Let me just. I have no clue why it is happening. Very weird. Now, if I just write it like this, if I take it as a, yeah. So if I just say this, so it's dot equals to false. See what happens. So there are cases we can see that kick blocker ID. So when I'm saying I'm doing it in this way, so definitely in the plays CSV file, there are rows where blocker ID is basically there. Of course, game ID, play ID, but when I'm saying that, okay, you just pick up the particular blocker ID, then it's not picking it up. So that's very I never happen. I never see this thing to happen. There are about 100 cases. This is very weird. Anyway, we will fix it. Looks like there are about 100 cases. 100 such cases are there. Anyway, we have to fix it. I don't know how to fix it yet, but we'll see how can we fix it. All right, so I would like to tell you one more right now. So essentially what we are seeing in this, that there are three things that are there. There are kind of three performance. Then there, one is the kicker, and there whatever output, and then returner, and then kick blocker. Now the question is, so these are the actions and performance that of the players, that different actions the players positions are, and then what is that this eared line. These are the different, we can say these are the different kind of measures, like yard line side, yard line number, penalty years, and penalty results, kick length. Next, the question is, for a particular player, we have to come up with some kind of metric. And the question is, how can we come up with a metric? So think about it. I would not, and then maybe in the next session, we will be able to do much more comprehensive way, much fruitful way. We'll be able to solve it. Okay. All right. Next question. Next point is, tomorrow, Professor Kavita will teach you the mathematical methods. So I'm stopping the recording.